Hey everybody, welcome back to Keeping It RE. Today we have a special guest. Chad big-timed us, so we have Natasha. You're welcome. And Natasha is going to talk to us about a handful of things, including project management, budgets, timeline, when you're running a real estate project. So we're really excited to have her here. And Paige, let's kick things off.
So Natasha, how are you doing, by the way?
I'm good.
Things busy so far this year? Is this like your busy time of year?
I think January through December is my busy
Oh, okay. That's pretty much what we figured.
Is that all the months? That's all 12?
Yeah.
That's all 12. Okay, I got you. Nice.
All right, so we're just going to kick it off with our first question and ask you about what the realistic timeline to doing a transaction and moving into space is like from a PM standpoint.
Okay, well, there are a lot of things that happen when it comes to the project management side of things. So at the very, very beginning of the process, when a client is looking at space, that's very much where Paul and Chad come into the process, and they kind of run that charge. I'm on the back end, kind of whispering in the ear with regards to giving them information about pricing, timelines, logistics, just kind of some good to knows about the space and its potential for a client. And so when it comes to that, I think that is part of what I'll help them with on the front end of things in order for them to get the correct lease language and cover all the aspects for their clients so that there aren't any surprises down the road. But my portion of things really kind of kicks into gear either once the lease has been signed or once we're very, very close. And so from that standpoint, I would say a comfortable timeline, because everyone has a job to do. All of our clients, they're also trying to run businesses, would be a 6 month to like a 9 month time frame, depending on the size and the need of the client. And then from there, we can adjust it, either pull a rabbit out of a hat, if you would say, to condense that or expand that depending on what their actual need is.
So brokers, myself included at times, are notorious for maybe unintentionally providing unrealistic expectations on certain things.
What?
Is this the first time you're hearing this?
No.
And that's where you come into play, to really set the expectation properly for the client, because a lot of the times these lease terms are matched up to actual government contracts where they need to be up and running in a space at a specific time. So understanding that realistic timeline, not the classic, oh yeah,
we can do it.
September 1st, we can make that happen.
You need to be in 2 weeks?
Yeah, we got
that. We can have someone do it for you.
Yeah, call Natasha.
You're like,
she'll make it happen.
Babe Jesus.
Yeah, you pick up the pieces for a lot of us all the time, which we appreciate. So setting the realistic expectations for these clients is so important at the beginning of the process, because if they know that it's going to take 6 months, but they need to be up and running in space in 4 months, well, touring an office space that's in shell condition is not going to work for the timeline. Whether it works for the budget or not, the timeline's blown. Mm-hmm. So, how do you make it work? You have to target other properties that might not need a full rebuild.
So I think to answer your question, a lot of times it becomes the comfort level, quite honestly, of the broker and that relationship that he's built with that client. And like I said, at the beginning of the process, I'm usually kind of in your ear, behind the scenes. And it becomes, unfortunately, they label me sometimes as a wet blanket, per se, say, hey guys, it's a union building, so just so you're aware, these are some things you need to be aware of, because it's going to expedite that time, or actually it's going to increase that time because of things that are going to, with union, there's a lot more restrictions and whatnot. On the other hand, there's just a lot of different components, and I usually like to have that conversation with the broker ahead of time, and then from there gauge what their comfort level is with communicating that to the client. And so I think just being open and transparent about that up front really kind of helps you all gauge that conversation, and when your comfort level is to kind of bring me into that group talk. Did I answer your question there?
Yeah, for sure.
Okay.
Now, to take it one step further, 5 years ago, we used to quote, perhaps incorrectly, But I feel like this was an achievable number 5 years ago.
Okay.
We used to quote that once a lease is signed, you could be up and running in that space, if all things progress properly, in 4 months, 120 days. Now it's more 150 days, 100 and, it's like you said, 6 months plus. What's been the difference? What's the driver? What's changed in the last 5 years that has expanded that timeline?
Honestly, one of the biggest things that I've seen expand a lot of that is technology.
Okay.
So we want everything to be really easily accessible at our fingertips because there's such a plethora of options out there that a lot of times that means that it's going to take a little bit longer for people to make the decisions and drive those conversations up the chain, and then the easier a system is for you to use, the more expensive it is, and so then it becomes a cost conversation, and it becomes a dominoed conversation. It's like, okay, well, we can get this to be more efficient, but then it costs more money, but then people have to know how to use it. And so I think the technology that you put into your space becomes part of the program and conversation up front in order to determine what the solution is, because so many people are going to wireless-based systems, and then they want to integrate it into things, into their furniture, into their lights. I'm getting a little outrageous, but
right.
I think technology is a big surprising factor. There are a lot of things that have come down in cost, and then there's also a lot of things that have gone up in cost. I think another thing is lead times in depending on the market that you're in, and 5 years ago. Was that? Where were we? 2019?
2014?
2014.
Good math, Paige.
Yeah, thank you.
That's what I'm here for.
So I think it's also, there's
USC.
it's now it's a contractor's market, and so they're able to charge a little bit more because
They have so much work.
They have so much work, and because it's all a domino effect, and so because there's a lot of more individuals looking for space, then there's more that contractors have to build, there's more that designers have to design, and so it's just a breadth of, look at your schedules, how many times are you working more than 8 hours? So it's just a matter of time to get the deliverables to the people for their review, and I think that's a big piece of it. I think technology, you don't realize how many options there are there. I think accessories and furniture, it takes time to make things, and everything nowadays is customizable. I think, and everything nowadays it's like at everyone's fingertips. And so in previous years, part of my process and other project managers out there was, okay, well this is what you can afford, this is what you can't afford. It was kind of a little bit easier because to streamline the process. Now clients know so much more about what is out there that they want to do that due diligence. They want to do a little bit more research. They want to make sure that they've looked up everything and researched everything. And so, sometimes we have to give a little bit more grace period to do all that due diligence on their end. And then damn Amazon. Every client, I have this conversation at least once. It says, well, on Amazon I found, and I'm just like, oh my goodness. Okay, yes. Well, on Amazon they do offer this, but it's not a commercial grade product. And so I think there's a lot of different reasons why things can go a little bit longer. And I think the main thing now currently is time. People just are so busy in every single industry that it just takes more time to get things done.
Well, I think that's a really good answer, and it's really interesting because I thought for sure the first thing that you would have touched on is the permit process, which can be crazy in different jurisdictions depending on where you're looking to open your space. So I'm actually pleasantly surprised by your answer because I think that provides a lot more information than the obvious. Well, the permit process in Fairfax County is just crazy, so that's what delays them, which obviously is a part of it as well.
Right.
But the amount of technology and what people are looking for within their space now compared to 5+ years ago, you're right, it's totally different.
I think at least as of recently, I would say even in the last 2 years, that's something that I've seen, which is surprising because things like the audio visual that goes into a space was usually the poo-poo piece that kind of gets thought of towards the end, and now that's starting to become one of the front runners that becomes.
Or after you move in, hey, you know what? Maybe we need a TV here. Let's just order one. And a lot of times that would happen after you moved into the space to understand how you're utilizing that space. But now you're right; it's a conversation that's happening way prior to that, because you don't want to 6 months later throw up a TV. You want to plan for where these LED screens need to be at that time.
And I think part of that conversation is now companies like Staples and Office Depot and Best Buy, they're starting to have a lot more business sides and commercially available products that now, instead of it was we used to bring a vendor to the table. They let you know what it is that you can pick from. Then they take care of it. They install it. They're good to go. But products are becoming a little bit more expensive, that now clients want to take it upon themselves and say, well, you know what, I can go to Staples or I can go to Office Depot. And so it becomes a little bit more of a coordination process because they want to take that on. But at some times, they're not in the ins and outs of it. So it's like, okay, well, you want to take that on, fine, completely valid, but we need to have this pocket of information by this timeline. And like I said, everyone's really busy. So it's just one extra piece that has to be poured in because of prices of things, and they want to take that off of the vendor and do it themselves. I think, what we were potentially going to talk about this a little bit later, but this is a great segue. There are a couple things, there's always going to be lead times. I think lead times when it comes to timeline is always a big component, but there are some things that people don't take into consideration when it comes to ways to either mitigate entirely or kind of get in front of some of those surprises that could, I keep saying expedite, but that's not right, but to extend a schedule longer than you necessarily want to. I think one of the two things, there's two particular items that I always share with brokers when they're touring buildings, and it's two things. It's the first thing is it a union building? And with union building, they have so many great positives, but something to keep in mind is when in the world of construction, there are going to be times where you're going to have to get something done a little bit faster, a little bit earlier, a little bit later, over a weekend, over an evening. You're going to have to be able to be a little bit more flexible. And when something is a union building, their unions are great. They have so many positives, but you have to allow a little bit more time in order to accommodate a lot of the restrictions that come with unions, and a little bit more money because of the requirements for union labor. And so I think that's one thing that becomes a surprise for a client, that is good to just kind of put it out there and just say, FYI, the building over there is not a union building. This one is. These are some of the things, if you really love this space, that you're going to have to be willing to look past. I think that's one thing. I think the other thing is also figuring out what jurisdiction, in terms of like what county, what city of, what town the building you're looking at is going to be in. Because like you said a little earlier in the conversation, permit times. That, for as long as we can remember, that has been always the largest variable.
And how much do they differ? How do they range?
They can range, luckily. Recently, Fairfax County, for example, has increased the minimum for what's considered a walk-through process, or the fast-tracking process.
Is that like the permit expediter? Is that
right? It's basically, when it's a fast track versus a regular of anything, it basically means that you meet whatever the minimum requirements are in order to hire somebody to walk into the permit office, have a conversation with whoever they need to have a conversation with, and if it's not that same day, it's within that same week that you walk out of that office with a permit. And so that, at a minimum, is about a 2 to 3 week time frame. So I would say that would be the minimums. Okay. Depending on, like I said, what jurisdiction. And,
that can condense the timeline pretty significantly through that process.
Yeah, and of course, we all know about the DCRA, that velocity program, which does have a very expedited, I can say that now, an expedited time frame, but there's a large dollar sign that's assigned to that as well. And it's not as simple as, okay, well, we're going to go next week. Those sort of, anything under the 2-week mark, you do have to schedule that time. So, even in places like DC, you have to be able to call in, get an appointment, and those appointments could be booked months in advance. So to answer your question, I would say 2 to 3 week to almost 12 weeks, depending on where you are. So you could be looking at 2-3 buildings, but they have to be in a space in, like you said, 4, 6, 9 months, and they really don't have the ability to allow for that long permit time frame. So that'll change where you potentially look.
Yeah. So that's a big spread. There's a big difference in a construction process between 3 weeks and 12 weeks. That's make or break at times, especially in this area.
Yes, and unfortunately, that's, you could fall in love with a building and you're looking at all of the components of the building. You love the light, you love the layout, you love all of these bits and pieces. But when you take a step back and you kind of figure out what are the other components that are going to really be important to be aware of, because, like I said, of how quickly we're moving past and back and forth, and how little time everyone has to kind of think about those things. That's why I usually try to raise my hand and say, "Hey guys, just FYI, I think that's I think it's a union building. Just FYI, across the street now you're in,
budget timeline.
You're in Arlington,
or
you're in Fairfax, or just trying to kind of help them out and be that little bug in the ear.
Yeah. So one thing I want to add to that piece of the conversation, and I want to give a shout out to SpinSys right now, 3120 Fairview Park. We are at their headquarters. They moved in here a couple years ago. We were lucky enough to work with them throughout the process, and they have one of the absolute nicest, coolest, hippest HQs that I've ever seen. Concrete floors, exposed ceilings, the furniture is amazing. Everybody has a stand-up, sit-down desk. It's next level, and their employees really, really appreciate it. So to come full circle to the thing that I want to add, I want to talk about furniture, because furniture can be such a large spread with cost, and it can be such a large spread with timeline. Sometimes there's 50 cubes sitting in a warehouse or workstations, and you can get them delivered on Monday and installed, and you're all good. Sometimes they need to build everything, and it takes months. So how do you budget as far as the timeline goes when you're having the furniture conversation with clients?
The first thing I ask them is twofold. The first thing I ask them is twofold. Yeah, right. Mm-hmm. Okay. So I think a really important conversation to have with a client when it comes to furniture is, are there any, because let me back up a step. In an ideal world, you want a client to walk into a space day one and be able to completely use it. That's the ideal.
Yeah.
We all know that because of one reason or another, or lead times or whatnot, that doesn't always happen.
Yeah.
So the one question, the first question I ask a client is, what is your expectation with furniture? Is your expectation to walk in day one and have all the furniture there, or is your expectation you want it to build everything and then have furniture delivered? Or so starting that conversation, I think, kind of guides the next steps.
Sure.
Because if they're, and it's been both ways. I've had clients where they say, we just want the space built, then we'll walk into it, take a look, and then pick furniture from there. Some clients want to be able to use their space completely day one. If they want to be able to use their space day one with the furniture in the space, then the second conversation I have with them is saying, okay, if that's the case, we need to figure out everything that is going to impact your ability to get your inspections first, and that is everything that a jurisdiction will want to see in a space, and that's things that are like hardwired into the floor, like workstations, anything that kind of impedes the means of egress and getting out of space. Things that are considered ancillary are chairs or conference tables or sofas that aren't going to stop you from doing what you need to do, and as we say, get your butts in seats. Is not as important. And if they decide that they have to have that purple couch or they have to have that leather chair, then we have to be a little cognizant to say, okay, well, that's something that will come a little bit later. But if you're okay with that, then great. We have the information and we have the order placed in order to get you in day one in order to have lessons.
Sure. Well, that's a great answer. And all right, so we want to end this podcast with a thank you to you, Natasha. This was great. I think we need to do this a couple more times because this conversation could go on and on and on. There's a lot of other things that I want to touch on. So this is just episode 1 with Natasha. I think we should end here with a little positivity from Paige. She was just in Park City for 4 days. So Paige, motivate us. Tell us what you learned while you were in Park City on vacation while we were all here working.
What did I learn in Park City? Yeah, basically how to not die. Did my first black diamond. I am a skier. And
nice.
So that was pretty cool. Went snowmobiling. That was also fun. So if you guys ever go out to Park City, great places to ski. Park City is a pretty touristy town. So if you know the locals, you know where to go. So
do you know the locals?
Yes. My dad's friends moved out there. Solitude, great mountain if you've ever heard of it. So,
All right.
that was my trip. And it was great. I don't have much advice except just try not to totally yard sale and wipe out because I definitely wiped out a few times, but that's okay.
No idea what you mean by yard sale.
I know.
You don't know what that means?
Did I just age myself?
I have no clue what yard sale is.
I would love to hear in the comments if anybody knows what yard sailing means. Anybody that boards or skis.
I don't know what.
Just
I
put in
ski.
the comments what you think yard sale means.
That's the thing is I ski.
You
I'm
ski and you don't know what yard sale is.
Yeah, I go to those on the weekend down the street.
I have no clue what yard sale is, but I promise you I'm going to be using that term once I figure out what it is.
Take a guess. What do you guys think it is?
Wipe out?
What do you think?
Sell everything. I don't know.
You sell everything? Yeah, while you're skiing.
While you're skiing,
here's
you're
my
like,
pole.
here's my goggles.
It's $50. No, yard sailing, for those of you who don't know, like Paul and Natasha, yard sailing is when you wipe out and you you lose everything.
Gotcha.
Like your skis are off, your poles are off. My dad actually yard sailed.
I was close.
Shout out Chucky Boy.
That's funny.
You sell it.
Yeah,
You
give it away. Same thing. And
No,
I said,
yard
and I
sale.
said
Literally
wipe
lose
out.
it all.
So
you do
whatever.
wipe out, but like you
I don't,
lose everything.
I don't know why you're clowning us. We were pretty close.
You were close, but like.
Well, we're about
You're a
the
little-
yard sale on this podcast. So thank you everybody for keeping it RE. That was very fun. And Natasha, let's start planning your next episode because I think this is going to be a big hit.
We will
Where I
continue.
talk less and then we just have Paige
I'll
sell
come
it.
with more
So we
prepared
have yard
questions
sale
next
on
time. Oh my gosh. Well, thanks guys. Make sure you're keeping it RE. Check us out on SoundCloud, YouTube, and iTunes. This is our 4th podcast.
It is.
This is our 4th podcast. Wow. Let us know how you think that we're doing, and we look forward to getting back and airing out to you guys soon.
If I need to shut up, it's okay.
Thanks, guys.